Well, it's 100 day, but I don't think I'm going to say the story in a really old way. Alrighty, boys and girls. Yesterday we talked about the beginning of that time of the judges. The people disobeyed God. God let some other country conquer them. They cried out to God. God heard them. He raised up a judge to help fight against their enemies. They had rest in the land. And here they started all over again. So we talked about Ehud yesterday, that left-handed man. And today we're going to be talking about someone else, boys and girls. The people again did what was wrong in the eyes of the Lord. They started worshiping idols again. They started bowing down to idols, and they forgot about God. And God let another king reign over them. His name was Jabin. He was a king of Canaan, and he was mean. His general, the person that was in charge of his army, his name was Sisera. And Sisera had 900 chariots. Remember what a chariot is, kind of like a wagon that they bring into, that the horses will run with, and that have these wheels on them. And they were so afraid, and they were so mean that people in the villages, they were just too scared, because these mean soldiers would come and take their things and kill some of them. So almost all the villagers, they left the highways. If they had to go somewhere, they wouldn't go. They would go across the fields. And a lot of them moved to the cities because it was safer there. It was a really hard time. And then they cried out to God. And this time God raised up a mother in Israel. Her name was Deborah. And she judged the people. She told the people what God's judgments were. And one day she said she sent for Barak. And Barak was a soldier. He was the general, kind of the person in charge. And she said, Barak, hasn't the Lord commanded you to go and fight against these Canaanites? She said, the Lord has told you, take 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun and go on Mount Tabor. And Barak said, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I'm not going to go. He wasn't very brave, was he? Deborah said, I'll go. But the person who's going to get the glory will not be you. It will be a woman. But Barak obeyed. He called the men together, all the people from Naphtali and the people from Zebulun, and he got 10,000 people, and he went up on Mount Tabor, and I forgot to check. I think Mount Tabor is somewhere around here, but I don't know for sure. He went up on Mount Tabor, and with all his men, at the bottom was a kind of a little stream. It was called Kishon. And then King Jabin heard about this, and he sent Sisera. Sisera said, ha ha, come, let's get those Israelites. And Sisera went to that mountain too. And then there came, Deborah said to Barak, up, the Lord has given them into your hand. And so there went Barak with his people. And sure enough, the Lord gave them into his hand. But the Lord was also fighting for them with the stars of heaven. And he was making it so that the torrent, the Kishon River, instead of a little river, became a huge one filled with water, flooding over, so that the chariots were getting sunk in, and the Israelites were conquering them. They were killing their enemies, and and Sisera was getting more and more scared. He thought he could get them for sure. And now, all the Israelites are coming. So he jumped out of his chariot because it wasn't working, and he ran and ran, and then all of a sudden he saw a tent. He thought, hey, those people there, they're kind of friends of us. It wasn't an Israelite's tent. It was a person who was from one of the descendants of Jethro. It was a Kenite. And Jael stood outside at the side of her tent, and she said, come in, my lord. Turn aside. Her heart was with God's people, but Sisera did not know that. Sisera, the great, mean, cruel enemy of God's people, went into Jael's tent. And then he said, oh, you're so tired. He said, oh, I'm going to lay down for a while. He said, could I have some water? She said, oh, she took a bowl. She took a jar of milk and she gave it to him. She gave him some butter. And then he laid down and she put a nice blanket on top of him. And he said to her, if you just stand at the door of the tent, and if anyone comes, tell them that there's no one here. She said. And then he fell asleep. And when he was completely fast asleep, she took one of those iron tent pegs, those tent pegs that you put in the ground. And she took a big hammer and she put it right at the temple of where his head was. She took that hammer and she went smack, and he died. He fell and he was dead. And then she went outside of the tent and she looked, and there was Barak running. He was running to chase that enemy of God's people. And she said, come in here, and you will see the man that you are looking for. And he went in, and there was God's enemy, the enemy of God's people who had been so cruel and mean to them. He was lying dead. Well, then they got all the people back together. They chased those men out. Their land had rest. And they made a beautiful song, Deborah and Barak. And they sang, they said, praise the Lord, for the people willingly went to the Lord. And Jael, blessed is she among women, for she did it. And then they said, so may all your enemies perish, but that the righteous shine like the sun. They sang a beautiful song, and the people could move back to the villages again because the land had rest. And I would love to tell you that the people thought we are always going to serve the Lord, but they didn't. And that is the end of that story.